Hey everyone, and welcome back to the MASSP podcast. I am Ryan Casey, and today we're talking about House Bill 5649 and what it means for Michigan high schools. By 2027, all public high schools must offer a computer science course, but how can schools prepare now? I'm joined by Larry Wyn from the CS for Michigan group to break down the key requirements, staffing, solutions, resources, and best practices. So if you're a principal or administrator looking for practical steps to comply with this law, this episode is for you. So let's dive in. So enjoy your ride to or from school, your run on the treadmill, or however you like to listen, because another MASSP podcast episode starts now. Well, Larry, thank you so much for joining us once again on the MASSP podcast. I think it's been a couple of years or a couple of seasons since we had you on last, but thanks so much for finding time to join us once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
So really today, what I wanted to do is to jump in and talk about this new legislation that just came out recently regarding House Bill 5649, which is requiring all public high schools to now offer a computer science course by the 2027-28 school year. So I was just really hoping, Larry, if you could kind of break down that bill and some of the requirements of that law and what that means for Michigan schools. And then kind of once we get done talking about the bill, we'll jump in a little bit with the nuance and some best practices and kind of some guidance that maybe you can offer from your role as to what schools can do to meet those expectations. So if we can start, do you mind kind of breaking down that new law?
Yeah, and let's break down the big piece of it, which is essentially what it means is that all high schools, every public high school in Michigan is going to be required to offer at least one computer science course for students in grades 9 through 12. Now, this starts in 2027. That doesn't mean that's freshman class of 2027. That means the high school has to have that situated by 2027. Now, this is exciting. Coming with the CS for Michigan Collaborative, being a bunch of organizations coming together to move this forward in Michigan, this is a huge milestone for us in Michigan, and it's following the trend across the nation. Like we're joining about 30 different states right now that have the same kind of requirement for high schools. There's only about maybe like 6 to 10 that have a graduation requirement. So it's great to see that Michigan is moving itself forward in this tech space and making sure that we're providing the students the access that we truly do need. But there are some other requirements here, so let me just kind of hit on a few of those. One, the course has to meet or exceed the current standards, the standards of computer science that was provided back in 2019 from the State Board of Ed, as well as it needs to be in the school's course catalog, right? So it's got to be online on the school course catalog website. It's got to be available for students. And then the other clause that they put in here is they want to make sure that there's a good faith effort for in-person offering. And so hopefully that we have a teacher assigned to the class, that the class is in person during normal school hours, so that way it's accessible for all students.
All right, thanks for breaking that down. So I'm thinking with my principal hat on here right now, and I will assume that there's at least a good portion of schools out there that currently do not offer a computer science course or standalone computer science course. So what are some of the first steps that principals should take to ensure they're going to be set up to be compliant with this law?
Oh, absolutely. And Ryan, you're exactly right. There's a lot of schools out there that still are trying to get computer science situated. It hasn't been a requirement. And so it's just kind of a grassroots effort. But now that it is going to become a requirement, in order to get successful in the space, like we have to consider one, let's assess what current offerings exist. Like you may already have this checkbox marked already by providing whether it's like CS principles or maybe it's a higher level course like AP CSA, or maybe it's an other foundational level course that already exists that can be built up from this. And so assess those offerings. Now be mindful, keyboarding classes, learning Microsoft, learning how Google works, like that is not the type of course that meets the letter of this law, right? It has to meet those computer science standards. So assess your current offerings. And then think about what staff you have. And so we've heard from principals that staffing is a huge
Mhm.
issue. It has been for a few years now. It's like, how do I get a computer science teacher when I'm still looking for a math teacher or a science teacher?
Yep.
Now, the great thing is we have the flexibility in this space. There is no endorsement for computer science right now in Michigan. It's a blessing and a curse, but the blessing that we have here is that anybody with a secondary certificate that can teach 9 through 12, as long as we can provide enough evidence to say they're great at teaching this, we can slot them in for a computer science course.
Okay.
And so that's why on the Department of Education's website, they have a page that even says, like, as long as you provide some professional learning for them or some sort of training that justifies it, they should be good to go. Now, and the last thing that a principal really needs to think about is scheduling logistics. Where do I put it within the schedule? Now, that's going to be the tricky part. If you create a whole new course and are sliding it into the master schedule, that could create some difficulties. We could even consider creating some 0-hour type effects and things like that. But I think the ultimate goal is to get it within those 7 periods that most schools have.
Perfect. I was smiling when you were saying some of those responses, Larry, because you took me back to my old teaching days. Because not only did I teach 0 hour, I taught like the BMA, Microsoft Office, and keyboarding and Google 101 stuff during 0 hour. So that takes me back. But
Yep.
you've touched on it a little bit with the staffing challenge there, and the need for not needing that CS endorsement in order to teach that course. So I think that's a huge one that that a lot of administrators don't realize. So I'd like to think there really is flexibility. You probably have somebody that's just naturally passionate about this type of curriculum in your building, whether it's a math teacher, English teacher, science, whatever, that can probably do this. Everyone can probably think, oh, I can think of 2, 3 teachers that would be interested in this. And so for just some professional learning, just in your role, what is available out there, especially things that I know people would appreciate that are low cost or no cost for some of those teachers that need to be spec'd up in CS?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are plenty of options for professional learning out there that come along with curriculum. Um, my collaborative, my work that I've been doing, I've been heavily partnering with the organization co.org. And so they're a national nonprofit looking to provide curriculum at no cost, no ongoing cost, no annual cost, but also they're providing professional learning. That's what my group, the collaborative, is providing. And we're getting state funds in order to provide um, that professional learning at almost no cost to the district. We're covering hotels, meal,
Wow.
registrations. It's about a $3,000 value
Oh, great.
if we break it down. So it reduces the barriers for schools to really get into that. But like, as you were saying too, getting the passionate teacher, like, I wouldn't just slot any teacher within this space. Really slot the teacher that's going to take this idea and run with it. And they're going to be the ones that's going to grow this program. Because if we're just throwing almost any teacher in there and just checking the box,
Yeah.
it might be that's all that this becomes at the school district. But if you get that passionate teacher that goes, you know what, we can connect that to the first robotics program that's going on. Or, we're really been talking about this makerspace idea within our high school. Let's connect that to the computer science course. And so you want that educator that's really going to brainstorm and think through what this is going to look like for their high school students.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about, principals need to review their staffing needs, the scheduling logistics, to assess their current offering. So again, for the school that isn't already offering some sort of AP computer science course, what courses or alternate courses would meet this requirement as well? What are some resources that are out there in terms of curriculum that they could use?
Yeah. And like I was mentioning, there's plenty of resources that are available. And I've heard of schools developing their own game design or web development, app design type courses. But a lot of schools are still looking for curriculum, like a full blown pacing guide curriculum that will help and support a teacher. You could look at CS principals, for example. I know code.org is providing that at no cost. I know other organizations like CodeHS is also providing that. But there are also more foundational level classes that are currently being developed to help meet the needs. Like I said, there's a lot of states that are creating these requirements. So organizations are starting to create curriculums that are specifically tailored for this. The Computer Science AI Foundations course that code.org is creating not only is starting to be at that forefront of creating some AI units, that's the hot topic right now, and that's at that student level learning, but it is also that more foundational level course that all students can access, not feel scared to take it, and can see themselves in that course and in that type of learning.
Absolutely. So we have a little bit of time before this goes into effect, but as you mentioned, it's going to apply to soon all of the students that are in your building. We don't want to wait till that school year to try and figure this out. So what can schools do now to stay ahead of that curve in order so this doesn't become a check the box thing, right? We want this to be a sustainable, long-term computer science program offering for all of our students. So what are some things they should start working on now?
Yeah, 2027, it feels like it's a far distance away, but it truly isn't.
No.
In my world, like summer 2025 is already here already, right? Like I'm already thinking about the future. And so what I suggest for districts is really start preparing now. Start laying the groundwork at this point, considering what educator would be best suited for this, really thinking about what offerings are out there. If you have a curriculum review process that you have to go through, like when do you insert thinking about computer science courses into that curriculum review process? Now, the state, the Department of Education, they have been supporting an initiative called the Script Workshops. And so the Script Workshop is an opportunity for a district to go through a one-day deep dive. What does computer science mean for my district and for my community? And so you bring a whole team together of educators, the administration, the curriculum folks. It might even be a business person from the area, a tech business coming onto the table as well. And you vision around, why are we trying to even get computer science in place? What is our purpose and our vision behind that? But then you start action planning. What does that look like for my district? What kind of courses are we going to look at? What kind of pathway are we going to look at? Is it going to connect to after school offerings? And so that workshop, that Script Workshop, is being also provided at almost no cost to the district. The Department of Education, as well as the CS Mission Collaborative, is providing the cost for the facilitation of that, the meals for that, in some cases the sub reimbursement. So that way it's really it's no cost to the district. And so thinking about all these supports and resources, this bill may feel like a mandate with no funding behind it, but we also got to recognize that there are a lot of supports out there that already exist that an administrator can tap into so that they don't feel like they're unsupported within this bill.
Absolutely. Well, I know MASSP has put out some information and wrote an article about the law and what it means for principals and our members. I know CS for Michigan has put together a really nice kind of one-pager that explains not just what it takes to be compliant, but best practices as well. And so I would just suggest to our listeners to be able to make sure you're thinking about that, checking out those resources. I'll try and also link those, Larry, into wherever we post when we get ready to publish
Sounds
the
great.
podcast that we're recording. That'll get out in a couple weeks after today. So people should definitely want to check those out. Otherwise, you just really appreciate your time. Excited as a former technology teacher myself, excited for this opportunity to come to our students and to see what great things all of our schools are going to do to have more of these offerings for students. So appreciate your time, Larry. Thanks for joining us once again on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So exciting with this new bill being pushed out there.
Absolutely. All right, take care. And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for listening to the MASSP podcast. Remember, you can listen to this podcast and others anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just search for MASSP or hit the subscribe button right now.